Way. I think this week I've learned how to cope with the technology which is involved with this. This is the second in the series of Payback. Last week I interviewed John Doran, and this week it is the amazing Miranda Sawyer. Anyway, I think this is pretty smooth. I want to speak too soon. Oh, oh. I'll just sup on this whilst I'm waiting. Oh, brilliant.
Like magic.
As if by magic. Oh, you beauty. Last week, I was interviewing John Doran.
Yeah.
And it was 2 minutes of this by myself going, I think he's coming. It was awful. How are you?
I'm fine. Let me just try and adjust. Like, I'm doing it on my phone.
Oh, yeah,
And,
me too.
yeah. And so it's on my phone. And I put like, basically, you can see like loads of books, can't you? Like this, this is the
Show
bookshelf
off.
of everybody. But it's not my bookshelf. It's my husband's bookshelf because he's an actor. So sometimes he has to do like a bit of filming. So it's literally the only decent part of the house. Like if I was to show you the rest of this room, which is our bedroom, it's just the tip.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm trying to like make it look really sophisticated.
No, I totally get it. I've put makeup on I've had a wash.
Me too, look.
The shame you can't smell us. Oh, your makeup's fantastic. Oh, eyeliner is on point, Miranda.
Yes,
on
like
point. But how have you been doing? You've been doing all right?
Yeah. Yeah, all right. I actually, well, I don't know, I didn't have the test, but I think I had the virus. Mm-hmm. So I had that quite early on, like in March. So they shut the schools on like, I don't know, the 15th or something around then. And I got it just before that. And no, I mean, I hadn't got a test, but it's pretty, I mean, I think, I had it. It's pretty obvious.
Well, we're hoping that if you have had it, then you have like this kind of a superpower now, whereby you can't get it again. We're hoping that's the case.
Exactly. But, so I'm like some kind of superhero, and I can go around delivering bog roll and things like that, useful things.
From Miranda Sawyer delivering your bog roll. Yeah. Amazing. I mean, we've only got we've got an hour on Instagram Live until it cuts you off with no warning. Yeah. It's lovely. But if you don't mind, if we could focus solely on your career as a music journalist. I did read that you had a foray into being a professional gymnast, but we're
not a professional gymnast. No fucking way.
That's what.
Yes, I did actually. No, you're right. I was a professional gymnast. Yeah.
Just lie, actually. Yeah. But yes, on music journalism. So.
No, I do the odd cartwheel to annoy the children. That's all.
Oh, so you can do cartwheels, but aside from that. The cartwheels, bloody hell, I wish I could do that. Why music journalism? What was it that got you into that and how?
Okay, so I did a law degree, right? And it was a long time ago. It was like in 1985 to 88. Mm-hmm. And it was awful. Like it was just terrible. It was full of people. I mean, I remember getting there and thinking, I can't be a lawyer because if I'm a lawyer, I have to spend the rest of my life with these people and they're just awful. And so I will become awful because nobody, you want friends, don't you? So whatever you do, you're going to want to make friends in that profession. And I just thought I'm just going to turn out to be a complete twat because they're all twats. And then I didn't know what to do. And I was quite interested in law as a degree. So I just did the degree. And then I was obsessed with smash hits. And it was like in its pomp. So it was kind of, it was in the 80s. It was obviously way pre-internet, and it was selling 750,000 copies every 2 weeks, and it was really funny, and it was just my kind of music journalism. So obviously the NME was amazing, it had great writers, it was completely brilliant, but what I liked was I kind of felt like, well, I know which records are good, like you don't have to tell me, I know, I just want you to interview the people and be funny about it, and they were really funny. And so when I finished my degree, I just was really looking. I saw a tiny little advert in the Guardian, and it said, "Pop writer wanted 4 smash hits." And I just thought that is my job. That's my job. And obviously, I didn't get it because I had no experience.
Oh damn!
But
I know it ends well.
They were doing so well that they needed somebody to train up. And I remember in the interview, they said the editor was called Barry McElhenney, and he said he said to me, Elton John's #1. Should we put him on the cover? And I was like, no way, man. You need to put on Brother Beyond. because I loved Smash Hits. And he was like, interesting, because they had just put Brother Beyond on their first cover. So it was like, it's basically, I was a reader. I was completely obsessed with the magazine, almost more than the music. And so I think they thought they could train me up. And so they trained me up. And it was great.
I mean, it's just,
it's so lucky. Like what I didn't realise was how lucky that is. Like it was like my perfect job. I turned up, they saw something in me that maybe other people wouldn't have seen, and then you just learned you learned on the job. I had no qualifications for it, nothing.
I mean, today I was being interviewed about some new work that's coming out, and it was a young woman interviewing me, and at the end I said to her, do you mind if I just ask you a few questions? And she went, oh, well, I've heard about this thing you do. And I was like, yeah. And she was just starting out, and she might be tuning in now. Her name's Lottie.
Hello,
and lovely Lottie. And I was like, well, what would you ask Miranda? And she was saying, how you get into music journalism. And I was even saying to her in the conversation, I said, but you know what? The landscape will be so different now to the one that you entered, to the one that she's in now. And I kind of feel sorry for her in a way, because she definitely has that enthusiasm and that passion. But is there still that place for music journalists of that ilk now?
I mean, it's different, isn't it? Because there are ways of covering music and interviewing people in a different way, aren't there? Like you can do what we're doing now, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you can do Instagram if you have access to people, obviously. But I mean, you know, a lot of journalism now, I think, is done visually. It's done, you know, people film it. Even if you're just doing a normal written one, people want to film it, or they do it in that way. And I think that if you are wanting to be a music journalist, then there are different ways of getting into it. And there's a kind of DIY aspect that I think is easier now. Like most people have got the equipment now to make a magazine or to put out a film or something like that. And that was very, very different when I was young. But the aspect that I think is really hard on people now is the lack of blagging.
Yeah.
I think it was easier to blag when I was younger, and now you need millions of qualifications for some reason. That kind of
fake it till you make it type thing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I would say, you know, music journalism is different from other journalism, isn't it? It's not like you know, I think if you're an inverted commas proper journalist, like a news journalist, you probably do need really, really good training. But I think with music journalism, you have to read all the writers that you like and other writers. You just have to read and read and read and read and understand why you like this article or why you don't like that article. And then you need to like music. And then that's it. You know, I mean, you know, if somebody came to me doing that, I'd say, okay, start when you're 16, start when you're 17, when you're 18, just turn up early to gigs, see if you can find, you know, say you work for a student newspaper, just, you know, do it that way. But that is an old blaggers way, isn't it? It's just a different way of doing it.
I think there's this, I mean, you know about this, which is why I'm asking you, but there's so many things which must have really affected, when I think it can affect the quality of, not the quality of music journalism, but what you're able to work with as a music journalist. So now, like the introduction of social media, and people, I think especially artists, they're much less open than they used to be and much more guarded. And it's almost like there's because they're in fear of this like social media backlash of anything that they could say. And then it's also, but then as a result of that, it prohibits artists from speaking freely. So do you find that a frustration when you're interviewing people?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think it's absolutely complete. That it's a really true point. There's a really great book by Sylvia Patterson, who I used to work with at Smash Hits, called I'm Not With the Band. And she discusses that, and she basically says kind of post Lily Allen, everyone just shuts up. They don't want to be crucified on social media, and they take control of their image a bit more, and they put out their own thing, and it becomes much, much harder to get anyone to say anything. And I agree to a certain extent, but equally there are some people that just will speak their mind. That's just who they are. Like, you know, I interviewed Stormzy a couple of times. He doesn't self-censor. He just doesn't. That's not how he is. And you get some people that are just like that. They're just super confident. And I think that it's harder if you're not as not like that. I think it's harder because you can get crucified, but everyone can get crucified on social media, can't they? You don't have to be a pop star.
But I feel like it's a thing that it's forgotten about quite quickly as well. Like there's some artists that say something and the next day it's like, I love this one. I'm like, really? But we were calling them all sorts yesterday. But you're mentioning...
I know, the thing I think is really difficult is when people are really young, because I think people, you know, they go on Twitter and they're young and they're trying to be hard and stuff like that. And they're like 14, 15 and they put up, you know, something really sexist or homophobic or racist because they're trying to be clever quite often, or they're trying to be funny. And they haven't learned. And I think bringing that up when they're older is pretty awful, really. Because
it was like that. It was when you interviewed Noel Gallagher years ago, and he said what he said about Damon Albarn and Alex James. Yeah. And I was reading an interview between yourself and Sylvia Patterson.
Yeah.
And I think it was Jude Rogers who was interviewing you. I love. And then you'd mentioned that moment when Noel had said this thing, but also it was just kind of, then you comment on the fact that like, it was just kind of his mank sense of humour. He didn't actually wish death upon these people and want this awful thing to happen.
It's funny, I was thinking about that the other day. So basically what happened was, it was a long time ago, and I interviewed, there was complete chaos around Oasis at the time. They were just exploding, and I was meant to interview Liam and it didn't even happen. And I interviewed Noel, and then I did him again on the phone, and he was somewhere like, I don't know, Japan. And I talked to him, and he just went off on one like he always did, and he slagged off Curation Records, and he slagged off loads of people, and he slagged off Damon and Alex from Blur. And
brilliant.
He said he wanted them both to catch AIDS and die, right? And it was at the end of a massive rant, and I put it in, and honestly we didn't even pull the quote out, nothing, but it was picked up in America and it went huge, and it became like this, he's homophobic and this and that, and actually he just hated Blur.
Fair enough.
I mean, you know, that wasn't, I don't think, I mean, it was just, he was shooting his mouth off. And I think that kind of thing nowadays is very, very, very picked over. And unless you're speaking absolutely perfectly all the time, you can get really crucified by it. However, I would say that some people ride it out. They just seem to ride it out, don't they? Some people get another go. I mean, I have to say it's normally blokes do.
I agree. But is it a thing like sometimes do you feel almost like, especially if they're like, if they're a new artist, do you feel a responsibility to them almost kind of guiding them like, I could write this, but I'm not going to because that could get them in a lot of shit? Yeah,
I said I remember I have interviewed people. I'm like an OAP now, you know, I'm like their mum. So sometimes I interview people and I literally will say to them afterwards, you know, you don't need to tell me all that. And I won't always put it in, you know.
And you know you can make stuff up as well, because one thing I've learned is nobody fact checks anything at all.
I know, it's actually really distressing, you know, but because I like the interview bit. So like, say if I'm interviewing somebody and I'm interviewing you and we get a good conversation going, I like that. And then it's a bit like, oh, I've got to put in like how many records she sold and like what position in the charts, and like okay, so I mean it's easier now because you can just go online and find out kind of.
But it's more fun to lie about it, because all these statistics, they're like GCSEs, no one's going to check.
Well, I mean some people do. And also if you write for American publications, honestly, they check everything. Like I remember once interviewing some band, I can't even remember who they were, and I said he had potato salad like for his lunch, and they checked whether they had potato salad. I mean, they just checked everything.
But this person, right, I thought that was just like a beautiful rubbish lie you hid in.
No, it was true, and they checked, and they wanted to see my notes that they've had potato salad. I mean, it's so the opposite from here, where it's just like, oh yeah, put it out, it's all right.
Boring.
But I do feel now, I mean, also, I feel certain responsibilities around. Like I did an interview with Dave recently, and it was when his album came out, and that honestly, that interview kept me awake for 4 days. Like I was just in bits about that interview because of his album, and he spoke about his brother who had committed a particular crime, and how do I deal with that, and what do we do? And it was the first time it came out, and nobody had talked about it, and the PR hadn't warned me, and it was just, honestly, I just kept waking up in the middle of the night feeling sick about the whole thing. I mean, it was just awful. And I've had, you know, you want to get it right. It's really important, I think.
I mean, do you get that when it's like, and we have had these experiences where you've given something, for example, like a really scathing review, a band or an artist, and then either you feel bad about it yourself, or you kind of stick by what I said, they're still shit. And then this artist or this band have just held this lifelong vendetta against you. And John Doran told me that he had some like proper scary threats.
Oh yeah, I can imagine, especially because he kind of reviews. I mean, I rarely review albums anymore, really. And the reviewing I do tends to be for things like podcasts. And basically, if it's a new, what I do now is if it's a new artist and I don't like them, I just think, honestly, I'll go to the editor. I'll just say, it's not for me. Get somebody who likes them. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of me reviewing something? Or if it's a podcast and it's rubbish, I might, you know, and they want me to review it, I might send them a little email going, honestly, you know, I'm not going to review it this time. Maybe try this, maybe try that, you know, so it gets a bit better. But I mean, I've done it in the past. When you're young, you know, when you're like in your 20s, you just want to go for the joke, don't you? You don't really think about anybody. You're like,
I mean, I would expect nothing less from you, Miranda, to know that you'd go like, I'm not going to review that now, but I want what I'm after.
I remember one time I described James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers of having a chest like a cauliflower, which he kind of did. You know, it was all bumpy and muscly and quite white. And then, of course, I bumped into him and he said, I've got a chest like a cauliflower. I mean, still now, Primal Scream don't talk to me. I mean, Bobby Gillespie doesn't talk to me.
What did you do?
Okay, it's quite a long story. Okay,
we've got to.
It's Screamadelica, right? Okay, so think of this era, right? Screamadelica. It's just an amazing album, and it is, I mean, just a drug frenzy. Right? And I get to do an interview with them, and you know, I turn up, and it's, if you're in a situation where a lot of people are taking quite heavy drugs, it's quite a heavy atmosphere, right? And I walked in, and it was quite heavy, but I saw Hooky was there from New Order, and I knew him, so that was all right. And I remember the first thing that anyone said to me, apart from Hooky saying hi, was the manager of the band said, "Are you here to interview the band?" No, yeah. And he went, "You can write my autobiography if you suck my cock while you're doing it." Like,
the manager of the Manic said that. Oh, sorry, manager of Primal Scream said that.
Primal Scream, yeah. And I was like, "Oh, it's lovely to meet you too, anyway." And then, so we had to. I had to
not
do
today.
This.
I've already eaten.
And I was like, all right. And then I had to do the interview with Bobby before the gig, right? And you know, I don't think, you know, it is not a secret that at the time everyone was doing a lot of drugs. They were doing a lot of drugs. And while I did the interview with him, he basically kind of gouged out in front of me. So while I was doing the interview in the hotel room, he kind of went gradually like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, and on the sofa, right? And then went to the toilet and was sick, right? Came back and just carried on with the conversation. So it wasn't a great interview, right? As you can imagine. So we then do the, hang on, my daughter's walking in. What is it, look?
Hiya!
Do you want to come and say hi? Come and say hi.
Oh, shit. Hiya, mate.
Yes.
Hello, buddy.
I'm telling naughty stories so you can't stay.
Your mummy is so funny. So funny.
I know.
Close your ears. You know.
I get
Good.
it from her.
Yeah.
I get
Go away
it.
now. You have to go now. You can go on my computer, yeah. Off you go.
What a legend. I love it. I know. I get it from her. Yes, mate.
So then they do the gig, which is really great.
She's very
and then
like a mum.
Everyone goes back to the hotel, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a rampage. I mean, everybody's in different rooms. You know, I remember I was in a room and I saw this NME photographer who was a mate of mine, so I stayed with him. And basically, somebody was shagging somebody in the toilet while we were in the room, and then somebody tried to bash my door down. It was just mental, right? It was great, but mental. And so the next day I said, okay, can I do another interview, Bobby? Because like it was really rubbish, the other one. And so the next day he was like basically a kind of walking ecstasy tab. And he just went like, while I was talking to him, he was going, and he gave this brilliant interview. He just gave this absolutely brilliant interview about what Screamadelica was and why it was about drugs and what was great about it. I mean, it was a great interview, right? So I write it up and it's the queue. And basically what happened was I got my drugs mixed up because I was a bit innocent. And they had, and I used the word, I said methadone instead of methadone. There you go. So
it's never good to get your drugs mixed up. No, okay.
So viewers, methadone is a heroin substitute and methadone is very, very strong speed. And that, like, I didn't know. So I put methadone in and it was wrong. And, and basically, Brown Screen really liked the article until they went to Dublin and they got stopped in the airport and searched and they blamed it all on this article, right, as if. Anyway, so then wherever I went at the time, so if I went to a gig, if Bobby was there, which he probably was, he'd just stand at the back going, methadone, methadone. Whenever I went past, he'd just go, methadone.
I love just all right.
And then
hey,
talk to me. I mean, you know, it's like, it just makes me laugh because I think they're a great band. It's a brilliant album. They've made loads of great albums, but they just can't stand me because of like methadone.
And that is absolutely brilliant. I mean, not that I'm endorsing drug taking, but was there a kind of? But I do think, like, especially in your position as a music journalist,
Yes.
Was there a time where it's just, you know, you get these mad characters in music, these over the top, like larger than life characters. You know, sometimes it's going to be because they're inebriated. I mean, what I've noticed now,
Really?
the landscape that I exist in, I'm like, oh, I go backstage and I'm like at a festival, I'm like, yeah, there's no eccentric characters anywhere really. It's all very well behaved affair.
Is it a bit more controlled?
Yeah, it's really boring, but it's actually a really safe, good environment to exist within. But is there a kind of, was there like a magic kind of heyday for music journalism where it was kind of, yes, there was loads of debauchery around, which I guess is kind of echoed by the music industry itself?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to remember that. So in the late 80s, there was a lot of money swirling around the music industry. I mean,
too late.
Yeah, I mean, loads. You know, when I went to Smash Hits, I remember going to this party for Bros, and honestly, it was in this embassy in Kensington, like a whole embassy, like massive house in Kensington, and you'd walked in, and there was like free booze everywhere. There was like a vodka kind of ice sculpture. There was cakes in the flags of all nations and sushi, which I'd never had before, and it was just that the whole place. There was loads of money, but also, I mean, at that time, I was quite hedonistic. I mean, you know, I wasn't hedonistic enough to know the difference between methadone and methadone at the time. But I was quite hedonistic, and I was quite happy to stay up. And I was about the same age as the people I was interviewing. And what happens is that, you know, maybe if people are in the studio, they might be being hedonistic, but you're not very likely to be there. But if people are on tour and you turn up for a couple of days, they're already on this like mental mad train of their world. And you just hop on for a couple of days and then you hop off and that's it. And so depending on where they are in that mentalness, you join in or you don't, or you're part of it or you're not. And I was quite hedonistic at the time, so I joined in, and then I am not hedonistic at all now. Only in my head. But you know, like, not, I mean, I don't, you know, I barely drink, and I certainly don't take any drugs or anything, so it's just a different era because I was different too, you know.
I mean, obviously,
you know, it still happens. I did an interview with the Fat Whites, I can't remember when it was, about 3 or 4 years ago.
My favourite band.
I know, I love them so much. And I did this interview, and it was a really tense and tricky interview. And basically, Saul left, right? It was like an argument between him and Leas, and I was sitting in the middle of it. It was really difficult. And Saul left. And then I spent an hour talking to Leas and calming him down. because I'd seen it before, and it, like, I didn't want to be, you know, if you see somebody who's absolutely in the grips of, you know, a kind of drug addiction, they don't love anybody except the drug. And so I was trying to help Leas with that knowledge, and I don't think it helped at all, but I'd seen it before, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. It still happens, you know. If you, any scene, especially indie music, I think any scene will roll and roll and roll, and there'll be a point where a certain drug just hops in and it just wrecks it. It just goes through like wildfire, because some people get addicted, because some people have got addictive natures, and it wrecks it all. And it's a terrible thing, you know. Some people die, and some people come out of it. But when you're young, you can't tell the difference. How do you know?
Yeah, and I think, well, hopefully with there's much more awareness now, and so I just think the industry have kind of wisened up a bit now, and they start to take much better care of their artists. There was one.
I hope so. Yeah.
I hope so too. And there's some really great places available, like, you know, new places available, like Music Mind Matters. They were amazing. And they're available for everybody in the music industry, the artist, tour managers, everyone in the industry, and they're amazing. I was watching this interview. I've seen it a few times. I'm a massive Lady Gaga fan. And I watched that Lady Gaga interview with you. And it's just... I remember the first time I watched it, and I was really angry, almost like about Lady Gaga being like, well, who does she think she is? Like, talking to Miranda like that? Where does she think she gets off doing this? There's these moments where you're interviewing her, and like, you've been trying for this interview for days. It's for the Culture Show, right? 2013. For days, and you're like, right, you know, we're going to interview her today. No, it's not going to happen. Like 4 or 5 days, yes and no. And eventually you get to do it, but she's been up for 48 hours working with some artists, and you dress the room in the oddest way ever, but you know, it's Lady Gaga. And there's moments where you're interviewing her, and you ask her a question, and she just goes, and she's dead silent and closes her eyes for like a minute at a time. I don't. Well, how do you navigate those scenarios? How did she come out without a black eye? I would have gone. You know, I would have been really insulted. But I guess you leave your ego at the door when you do your.
It was really hard, that one. So basically,
black eye.
The difficulty is telly's different from normal journalism. Like normal journalism, I can deal with that. I can turn up if somebody's a twat to me. I kind of think thumbs up. You know, great, good copy. You know, you can kind of roll. They're late, fine, doesn't matter. Just sit around, you know, all that. Yeah. But with Lady Gaga, what happened is they asked me to do it, and I said right from the beginning to the Culture Show, I said honestly, it's going to be really difficult. She's a massive star, and it will be really hard. I'll do it, but she'll mess us around. And they're like, yeah. And then basically, what happened is the way that the Culture Show operated at the time was that all the people who kind of worked on the show were based in Glasgow, right? And I was based in London, and Lady Gaga was coming to London. And so they negotiated, we're going to do it here, we're going to do it there. And it wasn't happening. And then we suddenly got time in the hotel where she was staying, which is this big hotel, which is really near to Broadcasting House, right?
The Langham.
That's it, the Langham. And so they had all these amazing kind of places where we were going to film. No, nothing, right? And so we just had this horrible corporate room. So they dressed everything in kind of sheets. That was all they had. And then there were loads of people in the room. I mean, just loads. Honestly, about 25, 30 people in the room. And somebody came down and said, check the temperature of the room. Check it was all right for Lady Gaga. And then checked all the lights that were on her, right? Which obviously cost loads of money. I had no lights. And I was like, 20 years older than I was like, thanks. No makeup, my own makeup. Anyway.
It's brilliant.
Thanks. And she came down, and the very last thing in my ear that my kind of director said was, we want intimacy and we want jolliness. And she came down and she was like a ghost like that. And because it was the Culture Show, she was like, she basically decided it was a Culture Show and she was going to be cultured. And she talked like this. And I was miles away from her because it was telly. So I was literally like, like social distancing times 2. It was miles away. And I was like asking these questions, and she would go, like this. And then one of the questions I asked, she went quiet and she held a pose, and it was for nearly 2 minutes.
Which means you
And
held a pose.
And I just thought, I'm not breaking this silence. I'm just not breaking it.
Call
Like,
the bluff.
the only thing I thought I could do was maybe take my phone out, like as a joke, and like text my mum or something. But like, do you know what I mean? To take the piss out. But I just thought, I'm not breaking this silence. You started it. I'm just going to sit here. And anyway, so we do this bloody interview, and it finishes, and she'd been so posh and kind of like snooty all the way through. As soon as it finishes, she's super friendly. She's like, she takes her pants off. Like, she takes her pants off and goes, oh, can you see my, like, can we see her noonie? And I'm like, no. And she like then is really friendly, and then she walks out with the Langham Hotel across this tiny, you know, not very far to the broadcasting house, and she cries as she does it. Single tear, like that. I mean, mental. It was mental, and I had an instant migraine. Like an instant migraine. And like, I mean, I remember saying to myself, I'm never going to be employed again on the telly. And guess what? I never was.
No, really? But
the culture show stopped and they never employed me again.
So I'm crying while you're telling that story, but I've seen it, and I watched it again today. God. And I'm urging people who are listening, you've got to watch it. It's on YouTube. Miranda Sawyer, Lady Gaga. It's there.
And you know the other bit, right? Sorry, just to bang on.
No, please tell me more.
When the film is finished, there's this kind of concept where I'm doing all my pieces of camera in my iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. And they're doing it, you know, when we're making it because it's like I'm a fan waiting for it. But it wasn't because of that. It's because they spent all the money, because the director and the cameraman and everyone had come down from Glasgow, and they were staying in a hotel waiting for Lady Gaga. So by the time it was finished, there was no money for me to do. They couldn't film me doing any pieces to camera because they'd run out of money. So I had to do it on my iPhone.
I wondered what it looks like. You're on a stakeout, like, okay, and then like you cut to it now and again, and it's glorious.
Oh God!
But then it's a thing I always wonder, like how an artist comes across, you know, publicly, like, you know, on versus like on stage versus with or even on a TV show. And then with music journalists behind closed doors. And you mentioned with that Lady Gaga one, that she'd done like Graham Norton or something the week before, something like that, and she was all like dead funny with Doc Cotton was on from EastEnders, and she's all like being jovial and like, hey, I'm a normal fun pop star. And then with you, she was really like, I'm just practicing the Marina Abramovich, blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, she was banging on about Marina,
it felt
Marina
quite
Abramovich and Jeff Koons.
And it feels really it felt to me hostile. I don't know how it came across to you, but what I'm trying to get at is that these personas, when you see people, like I imagine Stormzy, for example. Stormzy, I've met him a few times, but he's always like that. And again, on stage, that's a different persona, but that's performing. That's the energy and stuff is very different.
Yeah.
But do you get that a lot? Because there is a difference between people being on telly because you can see them.
Yeah.
Especially when they're sat next to other celebrities as well.
Yeah. And they turn on, lovely.
But do you see that character changing? And then almost...
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, there's something... Well, it depends on the circumstances. So sometimes you're interviewing people and you've got 45 minutes in a hotel room and there's a PR sitting there, like, just next to you. Yeah. And the intimacy is almost impossible. And... you know, I stopped working for women's magazines because of that, because you only ever got that really, and it's pointless. And also, if you got anything decent out of people, you weren't allowed to put it in the women's magazine because then they would lose advertising. So it was kind of pointless. But if you get basically, if you get a right space for an hour, and you give that person the right respect, I think I can make them talk. And even if they don't talk, then they don't talk. You know, that's fine. You know, there was sometimes people don't know you're coming. Sometimes people are really knackered or they've forgotten, you know, especially if they're on tour, actually. If you've been told that you can interview them and they've got a gig that night, I mean, it's nearly always shit, you know. Or it's because they're thinking about the gig. They don't want you there. They couldn't give shit. So it depends on quite a lot of circumstances. But mostly I can get people to talk because I'm interested.
Yeah, is that even
I want to know, you know, I'm interested and I like their work. It's very rare that I interview people that I don't like their work. Yeah. So you know, like, I know you're interviewing me, but I would really like to ask you about your video.
No chance. Not allowed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
not allowed. But
if you're interested and you want to talk about it, and, you know, that's it. So that's the kind of deal, really. But you've got to allow people certain circumstances. And I think that there are some things that I just know it's guaranteed to be shit. And I mean, that Lady Gaga one was kind of almost guaranteed to be shit. And that's what I was trying to warn them.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's especially when you're talking about, it's when they've got all the, you're right, you know, all the lighting is on her like this, and she's all this kind of ethereal goddess thing, and you're sat there like, hello, I am a normal person.
Hello, I've got holes in my tights, and I
no, mate,
my makeup is my own.
You come off way cooler.
That's
but
very
I'm glad.
Nice.
No, you do. But I'm really glad you mentioned that you can get anyone to talk, because Lottie, that I was speaking to earlier on, she had said, another question for you was, you know, what do you do? How do you navigate an interview when someone gives you a one-word answer? And I said, well, no one's ever done that to you, though, have they? And she went, they have. And I was saying to her, I was like, hang on, she's only just started music journalism as well. And I'm like, who the hell are you interviewing? They must be up-and-coming bands as well.
Yeah.
Or not big, who are giving you one-word answers. They need your press. I don't know how I would navigate that. Have you had that situation when you just get this? Not the people who can't be asked to be there, but
that's always
on
fun.
stage.
Yeah, where you interview somebody. I did oh god, what's it called? Bret Easton Ellis, and I did him on stage at Latitude, and oh god, it was a nightmare. So he was really hungover and was on stage, and I asked him the very first question, which was about his book, you know, as you would. And he went, I don't want to talk about that. And I was like, okay. And he said, I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And he said, I want to talk about The Hills, which is like a program I've never watched. So I was like, okay, well, I've never watched it. So, you know, you can do it. And I remember thinking, that's the only thing I've learned, what I've learned about being on stage, if you're in that situation, is it's the same as that Lady Gaga thing. You keep your body language really neutral and really, really still. And, you know, your arse is like this, so tight. You're 2 inches higher than you would be normally. But you don't so you just hold it really still like this, like it's fine. Like it's absolutely fine. I am not moving. It's fine. And then every question I asked him, he literally would just go, no, no, no. And I just thought, this is shit. And it was a tent full of loads of people. And I just said, this interview isn't going very well. Shall we hand it over to the audience? And just said, who's got a question? And did it that way. Because it was just, he didn't want to talk to me. Like,
did he respond better to them? Did he give them?
Yeah, it got better after that. I just thought, you don't want to talk to me, so I'm going to do that. But if it's, what I would say to Lottie, if she's in that situation, the main thing to do is let the artist talk about their work, because that's why they're there. So don't ask boring general questions. Just say, oh, it seems to me that this album is discussing this. Am I right? Or have I got it really wrong? Let them talk about it and give them, you know, if you've got half an hour, give them 15 minutes to do that. You know, that's fine. And then, I mean, if you've got an hour, give them 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll get stories out of that. And then you can say, well, how was it in the studio? Were the moments you didn't like it? Why did it take so long? Did you always think about the visuals when you're doing it first? And then there'll be something you really want to ask them, like something, you know, that you like about them. Just ask it really soon. And then I always think, if you can go back to their childhood, do a bit about the childhood, because then you'll know who they are. And it's really hard to lie about your childhood. What you want is them not to lie. Because people can lie, obviously, but it's really hard to make up a whole childhood. Like, this is another thing. There's a question I always ask, and it's a really old-fashioned question now, and it is, like, Smash Hits taught me loads of questions, but one of the questions that always works is, what posters did you have on the wall when you were a kid, right? And it's really interesting to me now, because people don't really have so many posters now. And I remember asking it to Stormzy, and he looked at me like I was mad. Like he just said, I didn't live in a house like that. Like, I mean, it was so revealing. He just said, I didn't live in a house like that, where everybody had posters on the wall and they had the trainers all lined up. It was just a place where we all existed. Like, we didn't sit down for a meal together. Yeah. We just existed. So, you know, you instantly know much more about that household. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
if it's someone, you know, you can find out about their music taste, or whether they're into football, or whether they're an outdoorsy kids, or all that kind of stuff. And it especially if somebody's young, if they're in the 20s, it still forms them. When they're older, it's different. You can talk about midlife crises and stuff like that. But like,
Brilliant.
when you're younger, your childhood really forms you, because that's what, you know, if you were bullied at school or you were an outsider, that's what you need to express in your 20s. That's what it's about, isn't it? If it wasn't good enough, that's what you want to talk about. And I think that if she's interviewing young musicians, which she probably is, then do that. Start talking about their childhood. You know, just say, it doesn't have to be anything really major, but you can say, can you remember the first time you got drunk?
Yeah, because it catches people off guard as well. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you is, do you have like a store of questions unique to you that you bring out the big guns if you need to? Do you know what I mean? Like John Doran had one, which was like, he asked Damon Albarn, like, do you pray? Whoa,
yeah, religion's quite interesting.
But just bringing something out which is unexpected. I was wondering if there's a few. You said there about the posters on walls.
Yeah, posters on walls.
But do you have any others
to get people into the childhood thing, really? Yeah, I mean, you can ask them if they had any fights at school. You know, were you good at fighting? You know, because a lot of people, you know, a lot of pop stars were not good at fighting.
If that question just comes out the blue. So yeah, this new album, are we going to be writing? Good at fighting? What?
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway,
I mean,
writing.
I used to have more. I mean, I've got in the back of my mind, I've still got quite a lot of smash hits questions that you can use, which will always help. But I use them less now because the people I talk to are a little bit older quite often. So it's kind of it's less relevant. And when they're looking at their childhood, they look at it from the point of view of an adult, so they understand a bit more how that happens, you know.
So your little one that came in before made the best cameo ever. Yeah,
she loves it, honestly. She loves the camera. She's like, hi.
She's British. She's like, are you really funny? Your mum's really funny. Yeah, that's where I get it from. Brilliant. You're my favourite. But I mean, how old is she?
She's 9, and I've got a 14-year-old boy.
Oh, so a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Good age. Everyone said that's a good age. But I mean, because I think I was reading smash hits probably when I was about 9. Yeah, about 8, 9. Because that's where I got my Britpop posters from, Blur and all that.
Yeah, amazing.
Is she at the point where does she have an equivalent of that? Like,
well,
obviously
it's really different because, I mean, she doesn't have a magazine equivalent.
Yeah.
Sadly. She has YouTube, and she has, you know, Spotify, and, you know, she really likes music. And it's really interesting. A lot of kids get music through games and stuff, or TikTok.
Yeah.
So, you know, they suddenly start singing an old Jackson 5 song or something like that, and it'll be because of TikTok, you know. And I remember my son, who is massively, I mean, he's just grime, hip hop, rap, you know, all that. And he suddenly said, oh God, there's this song I really like. And it was Billy Ocean. It was a Billy Ocean song. Right?
Brilliant.
I can't remember if it was, I think it might have been Get Out of My Dreams and Get Into My Car. I can't remember, but anyway, it was like, so I'd like, why do you like that song? And it was because it was on, I don't know, GTA, you know, it was like on Grand Theft Auto, so he really liked it.
But I just wonder about what's the future of, I love that you're Billy Ocean. Where does the future of journalism lie when we're getting things like
that does
curated playlist? Yeah, but then it's kind of, it is the reason I wanted to start doing this, really. Yeah. Because you've got the best stories, you lot. You do. You've got the best stories.
If we can remember
them. And when you do, and also it's a real art, music journalism, and especially whenever I talk about my love of music journalism, your name, John Doran's, and there's so many great people that their names pop up. Now it's much harder to do now.
Music journalists are really all right. Everybody thinks
they're really quite,
but they're all right. They're really all right.
They're all right. Some are all right.
They love music.
I really like your music, but I wondered where it's going to go next. And I mean, If
Well,
you were to
there's, well, I
tell
mean,
somebody,
there's
like,
places,
why
you
they
know,
should be.
there are places like the Quietus, which is just amazing. But the journalism that I miss is the kind of smash hits journalism, I suppose, really. And, you know, I look at certain pop stars and I'm like, oh God, smash hits will just, it would be so brilliant if they existed, if it still existed. You know what I mean? Like, you know, everything over the last, I don't know, 10 years, there'd be so many. You could do One Direction, you could do Stormzy, you could do, I mean, H, they would love H, you know, I mean, it would just be, it would be great. And there's a kind of democracy around smash hits where you could put anybody in. If you were interesting, there's absolutely no reason why they wouldn't have, they'd have a small thing about the fat white, so it would have to be really tiny. But they could, you know, they could definitely have, you know, they could have you in, they could have like, you know, they could have absolutely everybody in it because it was just dealt with in a smash hits way. And I miss that. And that kind of, you know, the great magazines, and I include all magazines, not just music magazines in this, are the ones that feel like a club. Like, you know, they know what they are, and you as a writer join that club and you create that club, and then all the readers are in that club too. You know,
Yeah,
brilliant.
in the gang.
Yeah, really, really brilliant. And I think that there's a lot of still really good writing, and people are a bit more, like you said, you know, they're aware of things that maybe we weren't aware of, like mental health and how, you know, women have very long been treated pretty iffily in the music industry, and yeah, that's changing. And I think that people are more aware of those things now than they were when I started, and I think that's good. But you know, it's interesting to me that a lot of really good music journalists end up working for newspapers. You know, it just seems weird. I mean, when I first worked for the Observer, which was in the 90s, they employed me because they'd suddenly realised that it was quite important to have somebody who was young at that time writing
and
about,
fit.
You know, I mean, I can see on the Instagram thing, people are saying that zines are really big, which is great. I mean, I don't know because I'm old, so you know, if there's loads of zines, I'm really happy about that. That's the best. You know, that's the best thing to have, because then it's your own little culture. You know, all the best music comes out of a particular culture, I think. Like, what are you thinking about? That's why I wanted to, you know, I wanted to interview you, which you won't let me.
That's why.
But, you know,
but that's what. But Smash Hits was bigger.
You made an album called Kitchen Sink, and you've done that video. I'm like,
busy.
Mate, I want to talk to you about that.
Sorry, I'm busy. She's not here now. My weird alter ego. But but Smash Hits had like a wider appeal, though, didn't it? It's not as niche. But then it's like for anybody else who's like a budding journalist or is thinking about getting into it, or for us saving it. What's been your favourite moments as a music journalist, like your proudest moment, or a thing where it's like, oh, I can sleep well tonight. I really why did you love that job so much? Or did you love that job? Do you love that job?
I do. God, I can't think about being proud. It seems a bit weird.
I know. We're very British when a thing that you did well and you feel good about.
I mean, there's a thing about writing, which is why I like, I mean, you know, it's great to do telly and radio and all those kind of things, but there's a thing about writing, which I'm sure you understand, which is you do the interview and you come out and you might think, oh God, that didn't go very well, or I need something else. Maybe I can get them again on the phone, or maybe I can talk to some friends or something. You know, that wasn't very good. Or you come away and go, that was a really good, brilliant. That was a great, I know that was a good interview. But all of that is different to writing it. And the writing it is the bit that, if you get it right, it kind of blows your head off. Because it's, you know, you think really hard and you don't know how to start it and you're like, oh my God. But there's something about writing that changes everything. I mean, I'm sure you have that. I'm sure you must have ideas for songs, and then in the making of the song, it goes somewhere else completely, and it hasn't done what you thought it was going to do at all. And that's just the creative thing. And that happens with writing as well. Even if you're writing just a little piece, a journalistic piece, there'll be a point where it just goes off somewhere. You think, oh, that's the act of writing means I understand. Yeah. Like, and that's the bit that still gets me, you know, other than the music. You know, the music will always get you because that's the bit that will get you. Mm-hmm. And then you encounter somebody and you really like them or whatever, but the writing of the article, that's the bit the bit that gets you, I think.
It's weird because when we're talking about proudest moment, let's call it that, proudest moment, I really thought, Miranda, you were going to talk about having sambucas with Grace Jones.
Oh fuck! sorry. I could talk about that. Would you like me to tell that story?
Yes, please. I'm like, oh yeah, it's all really interesting. But tell us about Grace Jones, mate.
Okay, I will tell you about Grace Jones because she is obviously completely amazing.
John Doran did ask me to ask you that.
Okay, well, so I interviewed Grace Jones, and I know when it was that. Remember that day when everything went down, like Black Friday, when it was everything just went down, all the money went down. So it was whenever that was.
Yeah.
And so I interviewed her, and I interviewed at this place called Julie's, which is in West London. And at the time, it's a very beautiful little restaurant with lots of nooks and crannies and loads of fairy lights, and it's really lovely. Anyway, I got there at the allotted time, a little bit earlier than the allotted time, and
very good.
The manager was there, and we sat and waited for Grace for about, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. So, fair enough. And, we had a nice meal. Drank a bit. Anyway, then Grace turned up, right? So I do the interview with her, and we sit in this little booth bit, and she drinks red wine, and I think she orders oysters. Anyway, we do this interview, and she's incredibly physical. Like, everything about her is really physical. Like, at one point she kicks her legs in the air and she insists that I grab her ankle, and she throws herself around, and she smokes all throughout the whole thing, which obviously you're not allowed to do, and everyone was getting really pissed off. And it was a Monday night, so obviously all the waiters want to go, and it's like 11 o'clock, nobody else is there, and she's a complete hoot. She's just brilliant. Absolutely great. And we have this great laugh and a brilliant interview. And at the end of the interview, we go through to the bar bit, and the bar is up here, and there's a little spirally staircase, and the manager goes down the spirally staircase, and Grace goes, sambuca, like this, right? And bear in mind, she paid for the meal, and she paid in cash, which nobody ever does. Like, nobody does. Everybody always waits for the journalists to wait. It's fine. So she pays in cash. She gets the sambuca, and she gives it to two of us, and she goes, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And we biff it like that. And then she snogs me.
Yeah! If there's any reason to be a music journalist, that's why. So fucking
so
cool.
She puts her tongue in and everything. So
she goes tongues.
Obviously, I'm pissed, and
happier than you've ever been in your life ever.
Yeah, and she's got these lovely soft lips, but she's Grace Jones, so I'm pissing myself laughing because I'm like, I am being snogged by Grace Jones. This is just outrageous. And then she goes, I am feeling horny. Like this. What? And she goes, it's a full moon, I'm feeling horny. Like, I'm like, okay, well, I've got to go home. My mum's babysitting. she goes, come to my hotel. And I was like, I think not, Grace. And she went, she was fine about it. She went, okay. And then what the really brilliant thing she goes, take my number, file it under grrr. and I've still got it under grrr, like that. and then we leave the restaurant, and she's just brilliant. And it is a full moon, and she's wearing like Izzy Miyake, like pleats like this, and she looks brilliant. And she literally runs down the road in Notting Hill, where everything's white and looks like Notting Hill, white, big white houses, and she's dressed in black, and she's got her arms out like a bat, and she howls at the moon running down the road like that. Oh, she's just brilliant. Like, she's brilliant. And the next day, I really expected somebody to phone me up and go, oh, can you not put that in? Because that's what normally happens when you get something good. Somebody, the PR will go, maybe not. And nobody phoned it anything. They were just like, fine. That's what she's like. Put it in. I love her. But I was too scared of her to go home with her.
But it's great. I
woke my mum up. Can I just say, I went home and woke my mum up and said, Mum, because she was looking after the kids. And I can't remember where Smiley was. But anyway, she was looking after the kids. I woke her up and went, Grace Jones just snogged me. And even she knew who she was. She went, "Ooh, is she the one from the James Bond films?"
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And I was like,
yeah. That's not how I would tell it. I'd be like, I turned down Grace Jones once.
Yeah, she'd do that. Yeah, she'd say, yeah, not bothered.
Miranda, I had other questions, but it's nearly an hour. We're 2 minutes away from an hour. Nothing is going to top that. It's a beautiful.
Nothing is top that glorious. In my life.
There I go. You know what? Even mine vicariously just by talking to you. I need to really raise my game. But I think
it's so
the
nice
whole
to talk
point.
To you, Nadine. I want to interview you now.
Not now.
I know.
I'd love that, but I think because the whole reason is like I honestly am a really great admirer of your work and what you've done. And you introduced me to a band called Blur years ago, and I was reading Smash Hits. And then because of getting into them, and then met my now producer Ben Hillier, and then I started making music. So it's kind of your fault. But it's just that's actually, it is the influence that you have on many people, on many musicians, and all of us little weirdos, you know, who stay at home and haven't got that many mates, and like we take solace in your words. And I still love reading your work. So thank you very, very much for what you do, and thanks for being here today. Oh, it's true. Proper, I promise.
That's so kind. I'll cry.
Thank
now.
You so much. Yeah, go, Mummy. Did that girl make you cry? Thank you so much, and take care.
Pleasure. See you. Bye.
See you soon, mate. Bye, 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 bye. We're doing a really awkward bye like that.
How do you?
Bye, love.